Good evening and welcome to the Civil Service Commission meeting of June 10, 2009. May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine.
Here.
Commissioner Gantis.
Here.
Commissioner Manukian.
Here.
Chair Karian.
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Coleman is absent.
What's next?
Minutes.
Move to approve and dispense from reading.
Second.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
looking at the minutes of May 13, 2009, under item number 3, oral communications, it's indicated that Richard Espiritu addressed the commission during closed session. That I don't think was true. He addressed the commission.
It should be period after.
That's
commission.
correct. One for this
Okay.
commissioner.
With the changes
Absolutely.
noted, there's a motion and a second. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine.
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis.
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian.
Yes.
Chair Karian.
Yes. Item number 3, I have one card from Richard Espiritu. Espiritu. Did I say it right this time?
I don't know. Ask him.
Espiritu. Did I say it
Call
right?
me anything you want except late to dinner.
I don't want to call you any names.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, and staff. I am Richard Espiritu. I'm here to talk about Stephen Malame, who was born in 1842 and died in 1898. He was a teacher and a symbolist poet who lived in Paris, France. He's famous for a book called Cry of Truth. I'm going to quote one line from his book of poetry. Bigotry is a faceless coin passed from hand to hand in silence. Bigotry is a faceless coin passed from hand to hand in silence. I want to talk about our men in blue, the guys who wear the sidearms. They have a code of silence. There's a new study, ethology, which is part of zoology, that talks about the study of chimpanzees, baboons, gibbons, and rhesus monkeys. They find that bigotry is a form of male bonding. According to psychology, bigotry also defines who we are, and in the past it has been passed from father to son. Here in the United States, we have laws, and there have been court decisions that have upheld bigotry and discrimination regarding race, color, creed, ethnic origin, gender, sexual orientation, and disability. That's what started me coming to these chambers. In the state of California, we have what is called the Unruh Act. Interesting thing, would you take a look at your agenda? It has the Americans with Disability. And Mr. Howard had so aptly stated several years ago, I was the one who rose the awareness of the City Council and staff to the Americans with Disability. We now have this on here. One of the interesting things that have happened, there has been 3 claims filed by Glendale police officers addressing harassment and discrimination. From January 1st of 2007 to June 15th of 2008, according to the administrative investigation, there has been numerous allegations filed against employees regarding retaliation, sexual harassment, and discrimination.
In the city of Glendale?
Here in the city of Glendale, yeah. I put in a public information request from that time to date because I don't know what it is, but I do have it from back then. Now, it appears that the City Council and members of staff have no stomach in dealing with discrimination, bigotry in the city of Glendale. And I'm talking about all forms of discrimination. I hope, and I am here for item 8, to hope that this commission will at least take on the issue of discrimination, bigotry, retaliation, harassment from one employee to another one, because you are the Civil Service Commission. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gantis?
Mr. Chairman, I would request at this time that we take out of order item 12B, which is in closed session, that we recess into closed session to consider that item at this time.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and do that. Do we need to vote on this?
No.
I don't believe we do. Okay.
If there's no objection, recess to closed session.
Thank you. Okay, we're back from recess. I think that the decision of the commission was that we will actually hold off on 12B and leave it where it is and come back to it later. So we will continue with the agenda items as they are.
So we're going to adjourn closed session at this time and go back to open session, Mr. Chairman?
That is correct. And continue with our agenda items. I think we were on agenda item number 4.
Correct.
Recruitment and examination status report.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, the item before you is our recruitment and examination status report. As you see, the report indicates the workload currently with recruitment. Each of the analysts' names are listed there, and just a general indication of where we're at on various recruitment processes. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Any questions? Okay, what's next?
Eligible list established.
Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item represents the eligible lists that have been established since our last meeting. As you see, we have three lists that have been established, all of which are promotional. 2 in Glendale Water and Power, 1 in Community Development and Housing. You see the list of total number of applications received in one column, and alongside the total number of candidates who made it onto the eligible list. If you have questions about these specific recruitments, again, I'd be happy to answer those questions.
Any questions? Okay, what's next?
Reorganization of the commission.
Mr. Mnuchin.
We just found out today that Mr. Coleman is not joining us for this meeting, and we were all looking forward to having him with us. What I was going to suggest is my fellow commissioners to consider, with respect to Mr. Coleman, to postpone this item till the end of the month, or
Well, actually, it has to be postponed until July 8th because Mr. Gantis won't be here on July 24th.
to see if he can join us at that meeting, and we'll have a better understanding of how his health is doing.
Okay.
You guys okay with that?
No problem.
I don't have a problem.
Okay, so item number 5 is moved to July 8th.
Can we vote for a new interim chairman? Oh, sorry, Mr. Kerry.
Yeah. Mr. Gantis has taken some comedy classes. It's funnier every time.
I tell you, it works.
All right, that's moved. What's next?
Class specification for approval, Park Naturalist Series.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is a establishment of a new series within our city classification plan, the Park Naturalist Series. There was some discussion of this in the recent budget hearings, sort of a shift in focus from what is currently our Park Ranger program to a program that really focuses more on the educational and interpretive side of the profession, a shift away from law enforcement. The two classifications in this series are called Park Naturalist, and there's a Senior Park Naturalist. And again, once the budget gets approved, we intend to fill these positions as non-sworn individuals performing, again, educational and interpretive programs. So with that, be happy to answer any questions. We also have staff from Parks and Recreation here to assist as well.
Mr. Menuchyan?
Quick question. When that does happen, what's going to happen to our existing park rangers?
Currently, there are two salaried individuals. One is a park ranger manager. The other is a senior park ranger. They're being offered to be reassigned to these two positions, where the manager would take the senior park naturalist position, and the senior park ranger would be a park naturalist. And they're being offered reassignment to these positions.
So most of their qualifications are they're the same?
They're very similar, except a complete removal of all law enforcement functions.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Gaines, go ahead,
Mr.
please.
Chairman, Mr. Doyle, so are you telling us, since we don't have the one from the previous one, that basically the functions of the park rangers are basically the same there as a park ranger under the new one, except for the law enforcement functions?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gantis, they're similar. And I can't say that it's the exact same job minus law enforcement, but really the focus of this is going to be on the educational programs, the interpretive programs, campfire, natural resource planning, the trail maintenance, things like that, which will take on the majority of the job functions, whereas that was just a part of it previously. And they spent a lot of time dealing with law enforcement and citations, arrests, and things like that. So Mr. Chapchian is here if you would like him to give a little overview of this.
I would like to hear, Mr. Chapchian, whether or not what the Rangers were doing is, other than law enforcement, was they had this experience. I mean, had they performed this type of stuff? Did they, in particular, following up on Commissioner Menuchyan, I see that there needs to be an AA degree for the park naturalist, and then there's a bachelor's degree. Are these current ones going to have the necessary experience to morph into these two new positions?
They will have the necessary experience, Commissioner.
I'm not experienced, the educational and all the other requirements.
Currently, one of the senior park ranger does a lot of the interpretive programming, campfire programs, the interpretates. So does the ranger, except the lower level ranger does more not code enforcement, but more law enforcement at this point. He's out there issuing citations, arresting, that type of thing. So the duties have been split, but they have done the naturalist interpretive programming. So it wouldn't be a drop off. They would qualify for the job.
Mr. Menuchyan?
The other side to that question, now you take that law enforcement component out of it, does that mean now that portion of it gets thrown back at our police department to handle that? I mean, obviously there's been a lot of thought in this process, and I'm sure economics has a lot to do with it, but realistically knowing how are you guys going to deal with that?
Yeah.
It's going to need the help of the police department, I guess.
Absolutely, Commissioner Menuchyan and the rest of the commission. Part of it is we've lost two positions in the vacancies. We eliminated two positions because of the budget cuts. So we really wanted to focus the program exclusively on interpretive to make sure that the people, we actually maximize the use of the open space. The police department, when we pulled the logs, the call logs, they did 80% of the calls to the parks, and they feel they can pick up the rest of the 20%. So when someone calls for police service 911, PD dispatches right away. They have 5 different districts, and they usually have 2 or 3 cars per district, so they can be at the park right away. There were times when the rangers would be up. We had one ranger patrolling the entire city. They'd be up in the north part of town, couldn't get down here for another 15, 20 minutes. And usually PD would respond. So they can pick that up. And we've talked to police.
Mr. Wine.
Commissioner Devine, this is to identify that this is not going to be a requirement out of these positions. We're not going to require, the Red Cross or the post certificate right away. It won't be a prerequisite to exclude people from the process.
Yeah, but if you say required to obtain Red Cross within 6 months of employment, within a time allowed by you, if you want to extend the time to 1 year, whatever you want to do.
They have the ability to actually issue citations. PCA 32 is just basic powers of arrest, which means they can issue citations for Glendale Municipal Code violations.
This is a PCA 32.
Yes.
It's not a full post.
No, it's a 2-week course. It's post 832 certificate.
Similar to our code enforcement officers,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission.
It's a 1-week course.
1 or 2 weeks at the most. Yeah, I think it's 1
It's
week.
offered enough to give them a year to do that. That was an issue with safety.
Well, if the park ranger is going to be transferred into this, I'm assuming that they already have that.
These do,
Yeah.
in the event that
Then
we
they
have new
wouldn't be
people
able to
coming
issue
in.
this.
Getting best of both worlds,
This works okay.
taking their programs away.
Okay, any other questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr.
To
Chair,
approve, Mr. Devine says second, and then Mr.
could I just clarify the change we're going to make under license certificates? And it'll just simply say, we'll cross out the ability to obtain. It'll just say, under licenses and certificates, American Red Cross First Aid, CPR certificates within 6 months of employment. The next one will say simply State of California Post 832 certificate within 1 year of employment. It's understood that that's a requirement.
Fine. That's fine.
Okay.
My motion is as corrected.
Motion is as corrected, and second as corrected. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian?
Yes.
Sheriff Carrion?
Yes. Best of luck. What's next?
Jurisdiction of Commission over investigations and recourse available upon discovery of employee misconduct.
Mr. Howard.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, thank you for having us on the agenda this evening. I believe this was triggered by a request from the Commission and an opinion drafted by Mr. Braden, formerly of our office, which is attached to your packet. It's a September 2nd, 2008 opinion. Some prefatory comments before I provide my report is that, one, while Mr. Braden drafted this opinion, I have fully reviewed it. I have reviewed the cases cited. I have done my own independent research, and I've also reviewed more recent cases than those have been cited in his opinion. To get to the bottom line, I completely agree with his analysis, and let me explain why. There are two major reasons and one actual third reason, which I can get to if you desire, but I want to focus primarily on the first two. One is the jurisdiction of this commission based on the language in the charter, specifically Article 24, Section 2. And it was Mr. Braden's opinion, with which I concur, that language does not provide you with the basis for jurisdiction to investigate individual claims, whether they be discrimination, harassment, or anything else that arises in the context of an employer-employer or employee-employee relationship. As I understand it, the commission focused on the phraseology of, and I'll quote, make investigations concerning the enforcement and effect of this article and of the rules and efficiency of the service, as the thought that might provide the basis for a jurisdiction to allow you to investigate individualized claims of whatever they may be. I'm using discrimination as one example, but there are potentially 50 others. We started off by laboring under the unfortunate lack of a definition of the phrase efficiency of the service, what that meant. No definition in our rules, but as Mr. Braden points out in his opinion, and as I will read from a couple of other cases I found outside the state of California, the phrase efficiency of service actually has some deep roots in civil service jargon. As far back as 1884, the United States Civil Service Commission began utilizing that phrase in the context of one's ability to perform their job and qualifications as an applicant or an applicant for employment. Likewise, it began to then gain favor within the civil service system. There's some examples out of Chicago, a case out of Louisiana, and some other states where that phrase began to pop up in charter language or rules of civil service commissions to denote the ability of one to be able to perform the core functions of their job. In other words, you grade based upon the efficiency. They use this word efficiency to essentially take the place of the word performance. And you will use the word efficiency or the phrase efficiency of the service in connection with someone's qualifications for employment, someone's qualifications for promotion, and in the disciplinary context, in other words, whether someone has committed acts or omissions which affect the efficiency of the service. Nowhere in any of the cases that I've seen, in any of the cases cited by Mr. Braden, is the phrase efficiency of service utilized in the context of investigating individualized claims of wrongdoing or misgiving. And so that's the one area that Mr. Braden predominantly focused on, was this whole notion of whether or not there's jurisdiction given to the Commission by the language in the Charter. And the answer, in our opinion, is no. Secondarily, based upon a body of law, which I actually alluded to in the context privately just a few moments ago, and it's the issue of potential bias. And Mr. Braden spent a couple of pages, but I want to go into that in a little more detail because there has been some further analysis and some more recent cases on this whole notion of the need to avoid it's more than just the appearance of bias. You need to avoid the appearance of bias that rises to the level that a reasonable person would believe that a fair decision cannot be made in a circumstance. And there's a whole host of cases that have come down over the last 5 or 6 years that have begun to address that issue. The most recent one was Morongo Band of Indians versus State Water Resources Board, where the courts of appeal had recently issued some opinions based upon their view of when certain administrative bodies, based upon an advisory versus an advocacy function, needed to be separated because of the potential bias. And those cases involved, actually one of them involved a Civil Service Commission, and those cases were predominantly looking at the role of an attorney playing an advisor, as well as either that same attorney or a member of that attorney's office acting in the role of advocate. And the need to keep those separate because of the potential bias that may occur when a commission, in the case of, for example, a Court of Appeal decision called Quintero, in that case where the Civil Service Commission was being advised by an attorney from the city attorney's office, where that same attorney at some point in time had also advocated on behalf of the appointing authority in a disciplinary action. And the court found that the bias was potentially too great to allow the decision on disciplinary action of a police officer to stand, finding that in the advisory capacity, the commission might have a greater comfort level in the advice provided and the relationship developed as a result of that advice, and may be more inclined to believe that attorney or a member of their office when they're in the advocacy role. Whether or not that was actually the fact, or whether or not the court was looking at and I think they were, the potential that might occur, the court then laid down what in their mind was, and in the minds of the Court of Appeal in another case, a categoric rule. In the Morongo Band of Indians case, which followed, the Court of Appeal in that case noted that the Quintero case laid down a categoric rule of a need to have an unbiased decision maker, and flowing from this need for an advisory, and there's a point to this, believe it or not, from this advisory advocacy separation. The California Supreme Court took that case and recently came down with a decision, and they started in their analysis. First, they disapproved Quintero to the point that for the point that there is no per se rule that you had to, in every case, have a separation of the advisory and advocacy function. But interestingly enough, what they did was they actually went into the whole notion of what would make an administrative body or an administrative decision maker potentially biased. And they talked about it, and I've actually got some language that I'd like to read from the case. And the court noted that when an administrative agency conducts an adjudicative proceeding, such as a disciplinary matter, for example, the constitutional guarantee of due process of law requires a fair tribunal, which is one in which the judge or other decision maker is free of bias for or against a party. And that can be demonstrated not just by actual bias, but in a situation where experience teaches us that the probability of actual bias on the part of a decision maker is too high to be constitutionally tolerable. The reason why these cases are so important is that if the Commission were to attempt to assume investigatory power, assuming for sake of argument only that authority exists, and our position is that it does not, but if you were to assume that authority, it would put you in a situation, in my belief, which would create an untenable bias. On one hand, you would have either a single member of a commission or multiple members of a commission either making an accusation and then directing staff to investigate that and report back to you, putting you in a position of potentially having to essentially prejudge a case which ultimately may come before you on disciplinary action. Because if the investigation determines that an individual has committed acts which are in violation of certain city policies and a department imposes discipline, under our charter, the only place the individual can turn to for appeal is this commission. They cannot turn to the city council, they cannot turn to an arbitrator, they have to turn to this commission. This commission can appoint a single member and others, but it's going to be very difficult to remove that bias where the commission is the one that started that juggernaut rolling down the hill, if you will, toward potential disciplinary action. So I think the commission has two real problems. One, legally, I don't think the authority exists, based upon our research, for an expansion of the phrase efficiency of service into some notion that investigations can be conducted by the commission into individualized acts or omissions of employees or employer-employee relationships. Those are left to within the context of a city manager form of government to the department heads, city manager, or in our case we do have independent investigators. Likewise, I think if the commission did have that authority, it would run afoul of the current body of law that directs administrative bodies to keep away from situations where even the appearance of bias can rise to an intolerable level. There's also a third reason which I can get into, but it becomes extremely legalistic on this whole notion of statutory interpretation of how I interpret that section in context of its entire paragraph, not just isolating words or phrases. I can get into that if you'd like, but perhaps you just want to stick with the first two.
Yeah, that's good. That's Mr. Manukian. Now, go ahead and I'll ask a few questions.
No, I just wanted to make a comment. First of all, I mean, at least my opinion, I completely agree in the sense that I don't think the same body that is going to be hearing a case should be in any way involved with any type of an investment. So I don't know how this has come about, but I think what might have brought us to questioning some of these things is I think during some of our cases that we have heard, we have come across situations that I think that have concerned us. And at least for myself, I was not quite aware of what is the correct process when we come across hearings and we come across the situations and things that are taking place or are claiming that they're taking place. that are very disturbing. So as far as being involved with the investigation, I completely agree. I don't think this board should be involved in any way, any type of the event, because I don't think you could give a fair hearing to the case if you were ever involved with it. But how would you recommend in dealing with situations that we come across?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, there were 2 incidents that I'm aware of, and that I'm not going to talk about the specifics of that, but my advice on anything that occurs, whether it occurs during a particular hearing, or whether it comes to your attention through other means, you have a chief examiner who you appoint, who works for you. They also, in this case, he's also the HR director, but he's the chief examiner. That, to me, is, in my view, your first point of contact for an issue that you want investigated. Or you believe, I shouldn't say want to investigate, but you believe there may be a concern, you should report that to your chief examiner. Let me, without getting into specifics, point out that I have had conversations with your chief examiner about 2 incidents, and also one of the members of the commission about these same incidents. I personally took on those incidents and investigated both. One resulted in a full and complete report, and the other has been bogged down a little bit, but all the work is done. It just has to be needs to be put to paper to complete it. And so they are followed up. I think where we fall down as staff is coming up with a process to let you know that it's been done. Because my guess is, and I think it's probably more than a guess, is once you or have either talked to myself or to Mr. Doyle or anyone else, it probably falls into a black hole or an abyss of silence because you just don't know what's happened. And I think we need to look at coming up with a simple, straightforward process without revealing confidences or confidential information to let you know that, in fact, it is being addressed. And I think perhaps that's something that Mr. Doyle and I just need to work at.
Because I agree in a sense that, because on the other hand, when we don't know, in a sense, we get the other version of the story that, this happened and nobody ever did anything about it. So this way, at least we don't need to know the details of, at least as long as we know that that issue has been looked into, I think that would help.
Your natural instinct would be the same as mine. My natural instinct would be to go to, I haven't heard, I guess nothing's happened. And so we need to do a better job. We, meaning my office, and I'm sure I can work with Mr. Doyle to let you know that if we receive a complaint, whether it's a complaint, a comment, or something that needs follow-up, that you be informed that there has been follow-up to it. And as much as we can tell you without, again, revealing confidential information, we should be able to do that.
Mr. Devine?
Just following up on that, taking that example you just gave, where we would tell the director of HR that we have an issue, or we'd, in essence, start a complaint or file a complaint, how would that impact our ability, again, to hear that case should it result in discipline and come back to the commission?
Well, in my view, just indicating that you have a concern about what was said, what was done, what you heard would not trigger bias. It has to be more than that. The cases, and going back as far as Loudermill and some of the other U.S. Supreme Court cases, that doesn't rise to the intolerable level of bias. The intolerable level of bias is if you intertwine yourself so much with it that it would lead a reasonable person to believe that you've prejudged the case. So that if ultimately an investigation is conducted and discipline is imposed, that when the matter is, if the matter comes to you, that you've already prejudged the case. Mere hearing about something or observing some conduct that you say, gee, I wonder if that's a problem, reporting that to Mr. Doyle wouldn't be enough in and of itself. Somebody may try to argue that, but in my view, they're going to need a lot more facts to be able to start climbing this hill to reach that level of bias that it essentially conflicts out the commission. I do not see, and the cases do not support the mere filing. I'll use the phrase filing of a complaint, and whether it's in the way of a comment or a statement or a request that you look into it, that doesn't trigger it.
Anything else? I have just a few comments. First, thank you very much for the report, and I guess we have to kind of thank Ron Braden. He's not here anymore, but he's done majority of the work on this, and it was a lot of work and a lot of questions, and I think that it was necessary for us to understand what our role is as Civil Service Commission. And hope, too bad Dr. Espiritu is not here, or he would have heard that we are not the people that deals with discrimination and harassment in the city. You have an issue, you need to take that up with the city council, or maybe write a letter to Mr. Howard's office, and they'll address that issue. So we are not the body to address that issue. We'll listen to anyone who speaks in front of us, but we are not the body to discuss discrimination against any city employees. We will deal with that as part of our job in a hearing, but that's not something that we investigate on behalf of the city of Glendale. So, I mean, hopefully this is clear to everyone, so we don't have to go back on this. Again, we will deal with that issue when it comes in a hearing, but we are not the body to come in and investigate those issues based on a legal opinion we received from the city attorney's office. So please, if you have those issues, take them up with another agency or another commission. This is not the one. I would assume that city council would be the one to deal with it. Second, if you lie in front of Civil Service Commission during a hearing, we will get you. I promise you, if you're a city employee and you lie in front of Civil Service Commission, I will personally make it my job to come after you. I will recuse myself from the hearing, and I will make sure that you pay for it. I don't know. This is something, out of everything that I've done in the past 5 years in this Civil Service Commission, if you come and lie in front of Civil Service Commission, I'm just so outraged at this that I will guarantee you that I will recuse myself from any hearings having to do with that person, either being police officer, fire, employee of the city, and I will guarantee that I will not rest until some kind of disciplinary action is taken against that person. That's one. And second, if you come and testify in front of the Civil Service Commission and you tell the truth, and as a result of telling the truth, you are actually disciplined or transferred, I will again recuse myself. I'll guarantee to that individual that I will do everything in my power to make sure that the justice is served on that particular individual, that transfer or that discipline is never ever sees the light of day, and the justice is served. So if you tell the lie, I'll come after you. And if you tell the truth and you're transferred and disciplinary action is taken because of your statement at a hearing, I will make sure that that does not happen, either if I'm commissioner here, if I'm not commissioner here. I think that's something that I can't really stress enough, because the sanctity of a hearing is so important in the city. The job that we do without getting paid $1, and we put many, many, many hours a week and month into this. And to actually see someone take it so lightly and come and lie in front of us, or a management taking it so lightly that to transfer or discipline someone because they tell the truth in front of us, is just so outrageous that I will not stand for it. I think that the legal opinion is correct. I think I appreciate everything that the city attorney has done in reference to making sure that we are set in the right place. But a civil service commissioner could recuse themselves from all proceeding whatsoever and report a misconduct, just like anyone else in the city should do. With that, Mr. Manukin.
Actually, I wanted to just on that point, I want to get a clarification. I just want to make sure it was at least my understanding was that you stated that if in fact at the time of a hearing we get exposed to some information that we share with the HR or is a part of our findings, that doesn't automatically make us biased if we ever have to hear a case against that individual, correct?
Not automatically. Again, most of these situations are very fact-intensive. They will rise and fall based upon the facts and the intertwining of facts involved in a particular case. My point before that I made, and I want to reiterate it, is that the mere indication to Mr. Doyle that you believe that there is an issue that needs investigation, in and of itself, with nothing more, would not, in my view, based upon both the opinions of the Court of Appeal and our Supreme Court, would not, in and of itself, trigger a sustainable claim of bias.
Okay.
Sustainable claim of bias. Now, change the facts, add more circumstances, could very well do that.
And it doesn't stop anybody
no,
from arguing
no,
against
and
it?
I want to follow on what Chair Abkarian noted. This city has a zero tolerance policy when it comes to not only discrimination but also retaliation, which was the point I think the chair was making. I won't use such demonstrative language about out to get you, but you can be sure that as long as Mr. Doyle is here, as long as I am here, and as long as those of us who do the right thing know what the policy is involving retaliation, that if we ferret out an actual case of retaliation that is sustainable, there will be action taken. And ultimately, this commission may be sitting in a hearing on a disciplinary action where somebody's being disciplined for that act. And there are a number of avenues an individual has, whether it's coming to this commission, whether it's going to my office, to Mr. Doyle's office. We have an employee hotline. There's multiple avenues of raising those concerns and complaints. And I can only tell you from the experience that I've had and the ones that we've been involved in, they are taken very seriously. And I know one can argue and disagree. Certainly sometimes individuals believe they've been the victim of retaliation and harassment, and if they are found to have been so, action will and should be taken. Should be taken.
Mr. Devine.
Along that line, Mr. Howard, generally the hearings are closed session, and generally Mr. Doyle is not here. He has someone from his staff or someone else is here. If the commission hears something that we are unhappy with or concerned about, and we wish to discuss it with Mr. Doyle, are we breaking the sanctity of the closed session by discussing that item that happened in closed session with him if he has not been here?
It would really depend. You might want to utilize your legal counsel, and in your hearings normally you have Mr. Potter, outside counsel. You may want to utilize him to convey the information. Your closed session, the sanctity of closed session is to allow you to deliberate on the particular facts, evidence, and ultimate findings in closed session. If what has occurred would not have occurred in closed session unless you've got somebody in there you're not supposed to, because the issue that would have triggered the need for a review, let's say, would have occurred in a closed hearing, but not necessarily a closed session. And maybe you weren't drawing the distinction, but I am. I'm looking at, for example, what you did earlier was a closed session to discuss possible
I'm talking about
discipline.
closed hearing.
The closed hearing. The fact that it's closed only means that members of the public are not permitted, but there will be other people here. There will be staff here. There will be possibly attorneys for the appointing authority, an attorney for the employee. There may be another staff member here. Mr. Doyle may or may not be here, but there may be others here. And so it's not a closed session. Doesn't have the same sanctity as a Brown Act closed session. It has it's got a different connotation. It's just to keep the public out. So you're not breaking the sanctity of that by indicating to Mr. Doyle, and by the way, at the closed hearing, this was stated, I think X, or I don't think X, but I'd like you to launch an investigation. We think it's appropriate for you to do so.
Thank you.
And we're hoping you don't have many of those, by the way.
Any other comments? And Mr. Howard, I have no doubt that knowing you and knowing the type of ethics that you have, that you will not allow anything even closely resembling somebody lying in a Civil Service Commission hearing or being demoted or transferred to happen in this city. And I have no doubt with that. And I say that very strongly because somebody reading this opinion might think that they would have a free shot at coming to a hearing and just saying whatever they want. There won't be any action taken. I just want to make sure, as we have done in the past, that if something like this happens, that we have some recourse.
And I think it's important to remind those individuals who may come before this commission that lying under oath is perjury. Not only punishable by potential disciplinary action, it's potentially a crime.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your help on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's next?
Agenda forecast.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, you have before you the agenda forecast for our upcoming meetings. We have made the decision to move the reorganization to July the 8th, so that will be moved to there. We also need to set a date for the Civil Service Rule amendments, which was originally scheduled for tonight. And I do appreciate, Mr. Chair, allowing me to postpone that item. We've been very busy in the office, meet and confer and budget items, and I do appreciate the opportunity to push that back a bit. But whatever the commission's pleasure for rescheduling that, that up to you folks. And that's really all I have.
Any suggestion as to when we should take the rule amendments?
Why don't we do it July
22nd?
8th? I won't be here the 22nd.
Oh. Why don't we do it July 22nd? July 8th is...
Same reason I'm going to make a motion for an interim chairman.
There you go, there you go.
No problem, July 8th.
Okay, let's move it. Would that give you enough time, Mr. Doe?
We're not going to be done with our...
Okay, why don't we just move it to August 12th? Would that give you enough time?
Yeah, that would work.
That would work better?
Things ought to be slow.
Because, I don't think there's any urgency in doing the rule amendments immediately. So if you even want to move it even a little bit further, I don't see any problems of doing it.
How about 2011? No. I might be doing a vacation in August, so maybe the
9909.
That's it.
9909 is good.
I may not be here that night either.
Yay.
92309 is when we're going to have the rules amendments. And Mr. Gantz.
Whether you like it or not, Mr. Gantz, that's when we're going to do it.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Any other changes? Okay, what's next?
Reports and information. Past due employee performance evaluations.
Okay, Mr. Devine, you want to do the honors?
Okay. According to our latest chart, the following departments have no past dues. City Clerk's Office, the Treasurer's Office, Development Services, Finance Section, Fire Department, Glendale Water and Power, Information Services, Planning, Police, and Public Works. And I guess we can talk about the first notices a little bit late. City Attorney's Office, Community Development and Housing. And I was wondering on that, Mr. Doyle, they have two lines there. Does that mean there are two separate sections of community development, or are there just two past dues?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Devine, that means there are two individual late notices there, one of which was due on April 1st, the other on April the 16th. These evaluations are set based on the employee's anniversary date, and it's usually either set at the beginning of the month or the midpoint of the month. So there are, in fact, two from community development.
And what is Human Resources? Is that a department in the city?
Have you heard of them?
I've never heard of them, but
I think
whoever they are, they need to know they have
this is the
past dues.
first time we've ever had the pleasure of being on this list.
And library, we have, appears there's four of them. Parks and Rec, there's one. And that's all for first notices. So I'd say all in all, the city's doing very, very well on their reporting.
City Manager's office
he's a
second notice.
Yeah.
And, this is March 1st, 2009. March, April, May, June. I gotta have a talk with the City Manager's office to see what's going on in there. It says management services. So hopefully we won't get to the third notice and we'll have to have someone from City Manager's office show up in here. Not a good example for the rest of the employees. Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate the rest of you that have the employee evaluation. Again, the reason that we need these on time is because if there's a disciplinary action hearing, that's the only reason that we care about these being on time, is that if we do have a hearing on a particular item and the reviews are not done on a timely basis, then we have no way of gauging that employee's evaluation or performance. And it really creates a lot of problems, as it has in the past.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. What's next?
Civil Service Commission under staff comments.
Mr. Doyle?
I have none.
Anyone else in here?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gantis?
As we all know, Chief Adams is retiring effective July 10, 2009. And on the evening of July 10, 2009, which is a Friday, there will be a barbecue dinner at the Gene Autry Western Museum. It's going to be an outdoor event, and it is going to be, Chief Adams has very kindly agreed that to have the proceeds go to the Glendale Police Foundation, which, as many of you know, is a foundation that is dedicated to providing those resources to the police department that are otherwise, to the extent that they're available, unavailable. So I wanted to make that announcement. There are announcements going out. There will be, I'm sure, for everybody and here, the availability of tickets. There will be a VIP reception prior thereto at an additional cost. The tickets are $75 a person for the dinner, and an additional $100 per person is the VIP reception. And at that reception will not only be the chief, but the leadership team as well, and so there will be an availability to mingle and munch, as we say, with the entire Glendale Police brass and officers. So everybody's invited, and you will be hearing more as this thing proceeds. It's a Friday night. Should be a lot of fun.
Thank you, Mr. Gantis, and best wishes to the chief. He's done a great job, and he's leaving our city, and hopefully we'll get a great replacement to replace him.
We already have.
You already have a replacement?
Interim.
Oh, interim replacement. Oh, yeah. I mean, okay. I thought something happened when I wasn't in town.
No.
Yeah. Okay. My comment is that we were supposed to have Roy Coleman back with us tonight, and all the indications as of yesterday was that he was going to be in a unfortunate further complication prevented him from being here tonight. We will hopefully see him within the next 30 days, and if we don't, then he will decide as to what is the best course. But we hope to see Mr. Coleman here very soon. I wish him the best of luck, and I know he's really exercising and doing everything he needs to get back as soon as possible. So hopefully we'll see Roy. We'll see you back very, very soon.
I agree.
What's next item?
Closed session.
Okay, we will be recessing into a closed session. We will be taking public employee appointment first. So anyone not related to that, please leave the room. And we'll be taking a 5-minute break before taking that item.